Welcome to Beyond the Loss. This is a space for parents who have lost a child in any way at any age, where no grief is ranked, explained, or excluded. I'm Dr. Sharon Spano, developmental coach, systems thinker, and a parent whose life was forever changed by the death of my own son, Michael. What happens when remembering hurts, but forgetting feels unbearable? After the death of your child, you may carry a fear that you don't even want to say out loud. What if I forget my child? The sound of his voice, the way she laughed. What if I forget the small details? The way my child walked into a room, or the expressions he made, the words he used, the things only I seem to notice. And sometimes that fear goes deeper. What if time takes something from me that grief has already left so fragile? What if the world moves forward and little by little, the details of my child's life begin to fade? That fear alone can be so painful because for a parent, memory is not just a memory. Memory can feel like one of the last places where your child is still close, even if it's in your own mind. Today, I want to explore the fear of forgetting, not as a failure of love, but as one of the hidden feelings many parents carry after the death of a son or daughter. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Loss. I'm Dr. Sharon Spano, and this season we've been exploring what I'm calling the hidden aftermath of child loss, the quieter realities many parents face after the first layer of grief has been named. This month, we're looking at some of the feelings we don't always know how to name. We've talked about guilt and shame and the way grief can sometimes turn inward. Today, I want to move into something else a bit softer, but still very tender, this fear of forgetting the details of our child's life. Let me add that this fear is normal and it's often grounded in the deeper reality that losing even one more piece of this person we love so deeply feels unbearable. And it's also important to note that after such a devastating loss of any nature, memory becomes complicated. On one hand, memories can be a gift. They can bring warmth, connection, even a small moment of closeness. You remember something your child said, a look on his face, a trip you took together, a private moment that only the two of you shared. And for a brief second, your child feels near. But on the other hand, memory can hurt. A photo could bring comfort one day and completely undo you the next. I know it only too well. A song can feel beautiful until it suddenly opens the ache again. A familiar place can remind you of what was, and at the same time, remind you of what will never be again. So as parents, we often live inside this very difficult tension, one of many. Remembering can hurt, but forgetting can feel even worse. And that tension is hard to explain to people who have not lived in this tension. Because from the outside, people may assume memory is simple. They may say things like, you'll always have your memories. Doesn't it sound so cliche? And as if that is enough. And of course, we understand what they're trying to offer. They want to give us comfort. They want to remind us that our child's life mattered somehow. But when you are that parent, memories are not simply a consolation prize. They are sacred. And they're sacred because it's all we have left. And because of that, the thought of losing even one small detail can feel extremely frightening. And I think this fear often shows up in very unexpected ways. We suddenly realize that we can't remember exactly how our child's voice sounded at a certain age, or we may look at a photograph and feel startled by a detail you had forgotten. Or you may worry because one memory feels vivid and another feels very distant. And you may wonder whether you have already lost something important without even realizing it. And in all of these thoughts, we can sometimes find ourselves, yes, once again experiencing guilt. How could I ever forget that moment? How could that detail not be clear anymore? What kind of parent forgets even one thing? But I want to offer you a few other things for consideration. And sometimes, particularly if your spouse is remembering things that you can't remember at all, that can feel even more confusing. But forgetting details is not the same as forgetting your child. Memory is a human part of who we are, and it shifts and it softens and it changes texture over time. Some details remain sharp while others become harder to reach. And that is not a failure of your love. It's part of just how memory works inside our human bodies, inside our human minds. And it's equally important to note that our memories are affected by the trauma of loss. I know that in the early days after my son's passing, I could only remember the traumatic details of his final days. It is only in the last several years that the more joyful memories of Michael have begun to resurface once again. Your love for your child is not measured by how perfectly you can recall every moment. I can't say that enough. And still, I know that may not take away the ache or the fear, because this is not really about memory in a general sense. It's about the fear of losing access. And that's a very different story. The fear that time may create more distance between you and your child. The fear that the physical absence might be followed by another kind of absence, one where the sound, the smell, the touch, or the everyday presence of your child becomes harder and harder to call forward in your own mind. So we want to be compassionate and gentle with ourselves about these types of feelings, thoughts, and emotions. Again, reminding ourselves that they're normal and that we can name them without feeling the need to correct them too quickly. I know this again from my own life with Michael and from the many parents that I've encountered along my own journey. There are parts of Michael that I can still see and feel so clearly. His presence, his expressions, the way he communicated with us, the patterns I came to know after years and years of caring for him. Some memories are still very close to the surface, and then there are other moments where I wish I could access them more. And there are some where I just don't want to go there at all. I wish I could hear something again exactly as it was, or I wish I could feel the full texture of an ordinary day with him, the way it felt to lean down and just lean into him as in his wheelchair as he sat there. I wish I could step back into one simple moment, not because it was necessarily dramatic or significant, but because it was ours. And this is one of the strange things about grief. Sometimes what we long for most is not only the big memory, it's the ordinary day-to-day moments. The way a room felt, a specific sound, like I could always hear when Michael clicked on his electric wheelchair and was starting to head into the family room or the kitchen. I could hear it from anywhere in the house. And the routine often is that we did not know we would one day ache to remember. The smallest thing that your child did that, again, no one else noticed, or perhaps that is why the fear of forgetting can feel so intimate, because it is only between the two of you. It's not just fear of losing the facts, it's fear of losing the texture of the relationship as it unfolded day to day. Those small living details that made your child your child. For parents who have children who perhaps died very young, the fear can take a very different form. You may feel that you did not get enough memories. I hear this a lot. You may feel that other people have albums full of stories and years, while you were holding only a brief season, a handful of memories, or memories from pregnancy, birth, the hospital, or the early days of life. And if your child died before birth or shortly after, you may be grieving not only what you remember, but again, what you never had the chance to know or experience. And that kind of remembering is different, but no less real. Your child's life doesn't have to be long for the memories to matter. And your love does not require a lifetime of stories to be true. And the fear of forgetting may be especially tender when there are fewer physical memories to hold. So if that's part of your story, I want to say this with great care, that the size of the memory collection does not measure the size of your love. And I know sometimes when we get into comparison with others, we can feel that way if we had lost a child in those earlier days, weeks, or months. As the world says, well, you didn't really have as much to lose because you didn't have as many memories. But the loss, again, is in that connection with the child, no matter what the age of the loss. So some parents have years of memories, some have months, some have days, some have the memory of a heartbeat, maybe a name, a hope, a body held briefly, or a future that is imagined. No matter the circumstances, it's your child and every bit of it matters. There's also another layer here. Sometimes parents are afraid that other people will forget. They may not only worry about their own memories, they may worry that siblings, relatives, friends, family, the larger community will stop remembering their child. I remember staring at a large portrait of our son Michael that hangs in our hallway some months after Michael passed. I think in that portrait, he was about 4 years old when it was taken. And he's wearing just this darling gray little velvet romper type outfit. And he has this amazing little smirk on his face. His hair was short, dark, and curly at the time. And it's one of my favorite pictures of him that a friend of mine took and created a portrait from. And as I was standing there staring at this portrait in the afternoon in the hallway, my husband came up and asked what I was thinking. It was an odd thought. One day I said this portrait will be sitting in some garage sale or in an old warehouse, and people will look at it the way we look at old photographs in a museum or at the Cracker Barrel, and they won't know who he was. And there was something very sad to me about that reality. They won't know that he was a real person that impacted so many lives, I said to my husband. He'll just be reduced to this old portrait with no name. For a moment, we both just stood still and looked at one another, but the question was in the air. When we're gone, will anyone else remember? And for those of you whose child died under more tragic circumstances, the question I most often hear rise up is, will people only remember how my child died? Another one of the loneliest parts of the long after is the silence that can often feel like forgetting. Because as parents, we often continue remembering in a world that becomes quieter and quieter about the child who died. People may avoid mentioning your child because they don't want to upset you, but sometimes that silence itself is what hurts the most. You may just want someone to share a story or to say their name, or someone to remember their birthday, their anniversary, the small details, the way your child laughed, the things they cared about, the life they'd lived. That's one of the things I do love about social media. We have the option to post anniversaries related to our child, and those posts can serve as reminders to others who often don't know what to say or do. And social media also gives them the option to comment or respond. And I love reading those responses, those stories, those memories. But at the same time, I want to be careful not to turn remembering into another pressure. You don't have to preserve every detail perfectly or to create a public legacy project, as I'm often reminding you, or to organize every photo or to write every story or to keep every object. That's one I know we all struggle with, or to make sure that every person remembers in the same way that you do, because they cannot. Some parents find comfort in memory boxes, writing, photography, photos, rituals, recordings, maybe a scholarship fund, a foundation, as we did for our son Michael, or just simply gathering on specific days. Others find those things too painful, too public, or simply not right for them, and that's okay too. There is no one right way to remember, as I keep reminding you that there is no one right way to grieve. Sometimes remembering is as simple as speaking your child's name in the quiet of your own heart or lighting a candle. Sometimes it's keeping a shirt, of which I have many, a toy, a drawing, a message, or a photograph near you. And sometimes it's simply, again, sharing a story, a short anecdote to someone that you know would welcome it and you can trust. Or sitting in silence and allowing love to be present without words. The bottom line is your way of remembering does not need to look like anyone else's, and it doesn't need to satisfy anyone else's expectations. The point is to do whatever works for you and to do it in a way that helps you stay connected to the truth of your child's life, and to do it in a way that is bearable, perhaps even somewhat healing for you. So, of course, you may want to guard the details. Whatever they are, it's personal to you. So, as I do every week, I want to offer you a pattern to practice, as I do in the solo episodes, leave you with something simple to notice this week. If the fear of forgetting rises up for you this week, pause gently and ask yourself, what am I afraid of losing right now? Is it a sound, a story, a feeling, a detail, a part of your child's personality, a part of the life you shared? Whatever it is, that's fine. Then, rather than trying to preserve everything at once, just choose one small memory that you want to hold today. Not every memory, just one. It might be something ordinary. Again, the way your child entered a room, a phrase they used. And I'll share one crazy example that my husband and I do quite unintentionally, but often. Because Michael was physically impaired, he had a speech articulation issue. Throughout most of his life, he was in speech therapy because he had difficulty pronouncing certain syllables, especially those with double consonants like PR or TH, those kinds of sounds. Well, one funny thing that we began to notice was after years and years of therapy, some words were just pronounced the way Michael pronounced them. It became the way we talked to one another as a family. We never had difficulty understanding Michael. And what was odd was we gradually found ourselves pronouncing certain words the way he did. Certain phrases are just Michael's way. And whenever those phrases come up in conversation, we pronounce them amongst ourselves in Michael's way, even today. So a question as simple as what time is it, with a response of 7:30, might sound like 7:20 because that's how Michael said it. In which case, my husband and I will still use that response when we talk about time. We'll look at each other and we'll both just burst out laughing. The point being, is there some thought, memory, story, or action that you can recall about your child that brings you a moment of joy? If so, write it down, speak it out loud, share it with someone safe, or hold it for yourself as a quiet memory. Then, if it feels right, you can say something simple but important. This memory matters. My child's life matters. I don't have to remember everything perfectly for my love to be real. Let that be enough for today. The fear of forgetting is not a failure of memory or love. It's part of how deeply you want to keep your child close. If you want to protect every detail, you are not wrong and you are not alone. And if some memories have softened over time, as I know mine have, that doesn't mean that our children are disappearing from our hearts. Your love is not held only in perfect recall or recollection. It's held in the life you shared, and it's threaded throughout your entire being, throughout your entire body, your mind, your spirit. It's held in the imprint that your child left on you, and it's held in the ways you remember, speak, carry, and continue. So if this fear of forgetting is part of what you carry, I hope you'll give yourself grace by honoring one memory at a time in a way that is best for your heart in this moment in time. Until next time, take gentle care. This is Dr. Sharon Spano wishing you a very beautiful week. God bless. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this conversation stirred something for you, you don't need to make sense of it right away. There's no timeline for understanding and no right way to carry what remains. Beyond the Loss exists to honor parents who've lost a son or daughter and all the complexity that this implies, and to support the professionals who walk alongside them without comparison, judgment, or explanation. Wherever you are in the long after, you are not required to arrive anywhere else. Until next time, take gentle care.